What's up, YouTube? This is probably going to be the first in a long series of videos. I'll be your host, Nabil. Just a little background on me. I've worked in the comic retail business for something like 10 years. Comic fan, collectible fan all my life. But this is not, these videos aren't really about me per se. Over the course of my time, in comic retail, I became friends with somebody who probably had the biggest collection of comics and collectibles I've ever seen, at least in a personal collection. I've been to conventions and things, and I've seen lots of stuff out in the world, but this individual probably had more things than I've ever seen, probably than most people would ever see. And over the course of knowing him, I began to help him with his collection. I think the term he ended up giving me was curator. He dubbed the place where he kept his collection the Franken Shrine, to the point that he has a plaque on the front of his home, and maybe in a later video I'll show that to you. But so it's massive, and it spans probably the 50s, 1950s, all the way up to now. It encompasses more than one home. So the collection is so large, it's housed in 3 locations. Yeah. But unfortunately, about a week or two ago, this friend passed away. So my role as curator, helping to organize, display, that sort of thing for this collection has sort of changed. And I've now been charged with the task of helping to get rid of it all. But the new owner of it is okay with it happening over time. And I thought a good way to sort of honor the memory of my friend. Oh, you might run into this guy every once in a while in our videos. His chance. Gotta hear you, chunky boy. The point is to honor this person by sort of showcasing these things that he's collected all over the years. There's so many collectibles and toys of like limited value, limited numbering that a lot of people have never seen, or if they've seen, they've never seen showcased. And I thought maybe this would be a good venue to kind of show them off, maybe give some background information on them. And, for any that are actually interested in purchasing them, I would give you guys the information in the description to, reach out to me to be able to maybe get your hands on them if that's something you'd want. But I've got a lot of knowledge in this area, be it on these specific items or on just background in general, that this is something that I feel is a service I can bring to you, the viewer. And it's gonna kind of happen in batches, just because there's so much of it. I can only get my hands on so much of it at any given time. Some things are really big, and the new owner is only dispensing it in certain quantities because he was related to the person who passed. So while he doesn't hold any sentimental attachment to the items, he holds a sentimental attachment to his brother. And I think he feels that if he pushes it all out right away, he would be hurting his brother's memory. And I respect that. But yeah, So I've got a batch to start with today, um, and we can kind of get into it together. Sort of the opposite of an unboxing, if you want to think about it that way, because eventually these things will go into boxes to go places. But yeah, let's get started. Alright, so the first piece that we've got is this lovely Star Wars General Grievous. It comes from Comicbook. It's their artifacts line. This actually came in two versions. There was a pre-painted and a actual painted. This, I believe, is the pre-painted version. It was released in 2007, so it's, obviously not going to be easy to come by anymore. It's going to be the type of thing that you're only going to see in personal collections or I guess stores that, I don't know, bought it from somebody. I would be remiss to think that a comic book store or toy store would be sitting on a figure from 13 years ago. So if anybody has this, it's because somebody let it go from their collection. But yep. Like I said, this comes from Comicbook. They're based out of Japan. They actually started in 1947. For anybody who's not familiar with them, they started as a single doll store in Tokyo, and they went from there. And now they make a lot of. I'm not sure if they do any unlicensed products, but I know all the things that I've ever seen or bought from them are, licensed things like this. They do. Their big thing is their figures are like assemblable. So like, despite the fact that you see him, all like that, you do have to put him together. And I don't know that I would consider this a model per se, but they also do model kits. I think another one of their big ones is like Gundams. But yeah. So that's General Grievous. He is. So, the condition for all these things that I'm going to show you do vary. I would say better than 75% of them are brand new, never opened, but, there are some exceptions. This one in particular, because it was a model, the owner, I know, never intended to put it together, but for something like this, he would at least want to know that all the pieces were there. So Grievous has been opened, but if one were to get him, you'll notice that he's sealed in plastic inside the box, and that part of him has never been opened. So, I know a lot of toy collectors use terms like mint in box or sealed in box. So I think in the strictest sense, this isn't sealed in box. I would probably still call it mint in box though. So that's General Grievous. Next, we've got the Conjuring Universe's The Nun. She is relatively new. This figure was released in 2018. I don't remember how old the Nun movie is at this point. It's probably around there, maybe 2017. So it's relatively close to the release of what it's tied to. That being said, this is probably still in circulation. It's probably not too hard to come by. It's made by Mezco. For anybody who's not familiar with Mezco, they started in about 2000. They were previously Aztec Toys for a very brief period. Aztec didn't last, so they the owner, whose name is what is his name? It's Michael Markowitz, but his nickname was Mez. So when he made the toy company Mezco, hey Mez, so I went with that. I meant to give you guys the ranges on these, like what they're going for. Well, we'll start with this one, and I'll go back and I'll tell you Grievous. But so I'm not sure what this retailed for. When you go back to look at these things when they're like not out in the world anymore, and you go to try to compare the prices, usually they don't tell you what they are. But I will say now, if you were what I'm seeing this going for somewhere between $45 and $90. So it's not really breaking any banks at the moment. If this is something that you're interested in, I haven't settled on a price yet, but I will say that everything that ends up going will likely go for slightly under whatever the lowest price is. So, so there's that. Grievous, for some perspective, we'll go back to him for a second. Grievous, because he's older and he's not so easy to find anymore, the range on him was 215 was the low, and the high is about 470. And those are all sold prices. Anything I give you will be sold, because if I tell somebody a listed price, anybody could list anything for anything. Anytime you want to compare stuff, just a general rule of thumb for values, sold price is what you want, because that means that's what someone paid for it. But yeah, so this guy is clearly, harder to come by if people are paying that much for him. Again, none of these prices are quite settled on yet, but probably a little bit under whatever that lowest sold price will be what we end up moving these for. So let's see. After Grievous and the Nun, our next one for the day is actually another Mezco toy. This is Regan from The Exorcist, if you can't tell. The person who owned all these things, he was a big comic fan, but horror was his real passion. So a lot of the pieces you'll see are horror related. But if you notice, the name under Regan is Living Dead Dolls. This is probably one of Mezco's most popular toy lines. It's basically where they make doll versions of scary everything. I've seen them all across the spectrum. I've seen like Friday, I've seen Jason, I've seen women from all the different scary films. So, but yeah, so this is another Mezco. So these are relatively common too. This was only issued in 2017. They may have done an earlier series. I'd be a little shocked to think that Mezco waited this long to put out a Regan, but she also doesn't go for like crazy money. The low on her was something like 39, and the high was like 72. So, you could this will probably go for something like 30 or 35 when it goes up for sale. And again, this is another one where you could still theoretically find it out in the world, maybe, depending on where you go, how stuff sells. I can tell you myself, my own store's got some things from the last couple of years still, like collectible wise. Sometimes they just, you don't have the right demographic of people walking in the door, so stuff sits. But she might be findable for you. This might be something you enjoy if you're a fan of The Exorcist. I got two more for you today. This one was a Dracula from Hammer Films, which I didn't realize had their own toy line. I've checked every which way on this thing, because there are a lot of people license stuff and then they, pass it off to another toy company to make. But apparently Hammer had their own line of toys for a bit. And this was their version of Dracula. It's Christopher Lee Dracula. This is still pretty nice in box. A lot of these things have a little bit of shelf wear, things like that. But again, like I said, most if not all these things were never opened. Seals are still good on them. If you can tell, but this was issued also in 2004. So I'm gonna lean towards like the Grievous on this one and say this one's probably a little harder to come by and a little more niche. It's if you're a fan of Hammer and missed this, you're gonna be the type of person that's looking for this. I'd be shocked if some random person just bought this Dracula not knowing what it was from. Hammer was a very specific type of horror film. They did start in 1934, but a lot of people compare them to sort of an alternative to the Universal monsters, if you're familiar with those, like the black and white Mummy, Frankenstein, Dracula, like Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney, Werewolf, and things like that. But so they reintroduced the world to the horror monsters in the 50s, but in color, which, was a big deal for the time. And Christopher Lee, this is probably one, if not his most iconic role when he did any of the Dracula work for them. And then it's reflected in this beautiful figure, and also in the price. So this one ranged from 150 to 215 for this lovely figure. So yeah, and it's 16 years old at this point, so I don't think you're going to be finding this one out in the world. This is going to be like an eBay type deal. Yeah. And then our last one for today. Not sure how many of you guys are familiar with this brand, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with our friend Heath Ledger. So, this is a Heath Ledger Joker figure. But it's not just any Heath Ledger Joker figure. This is from a brand called Hot Toys. So for any of you that aren't familiar with Hot Toys, they've got they started in 2000. They're pretty much exclusively licensed material, but they're almost always in very small quantities. It's like once it's gone type deal. I was a little shocked to see that this one doesn't actually have a limited number, so I don't know if they don't disclose how many, just in case they eke out a couple extra, but no limited number on this thing. But of everything we've got today, this one's got like the most consistent price range value because they are, like I said, relatively exclusive. Their whole thing is, and I mean they do other stuff now, but their pitch in the 2000s when they started was they were going to be the exclusive company to make 1 to 6 scale figures, and they were going to be specifically movie masterpieces is the name of their series. I mean, over their 20 years, they've expanded into other things, but this is what they're known for the most. And this is, I believe, a movie masterpiece figure. Looking to see, I thought it said somewhere. Yes. Right there in the credit line, movie masterpiece. But yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of reasons that would make this thing valuable. Heath Ledger Joker, that was many people's favorite Joker. It was a very good Joker, whether you're, not in agreement that he's the best or not. I'm not saying one way or the other. I have my own personal preference on who I think the best Joker is. It could be that. It could be the fact that he's dead. It could just be that it's a hot toy. It could be a combination of those things. But so the range on this was very small range, but a very high price. I've only seen 2 sold in the last few months, and one went for $350 and the other was $370. So these things, man, they hold value. It was issued in 2008, which I want to say that they probably got the license at the time the movie was coming out, so it was like released in tandem. It's like, oh, hey, here's the Dark Knight movie, and you're already seeing in the catalog the stuff to order like the day the movie came out, and this was probably one of them. So, yeah, he'll probably go in the 300 range once I list those up. But that's our first batch. I hope I gave you some worthwhile information. I hope this is something that you'll be interested in, come back for more. Whether you're kind of scouting to buy some of these things, or if you're just looking to learn a little bit about some stuff. I gave you a little bit about Hot Toys, Mezco, Hammer, or even What else? Who else? Who else did we have today? Well, and we'll go through some more stuff as we get to them, because there's a lot of toy companies out there. There's a lot of things in this collection. Like I said, I plan to kind of continue to do this as I get more. But if you're interested in the links, I'm going to put links to Facebook and eBay where these are likely going to go. If you catch me before I list them, we can try to like talk out some possible purchase options. I use PayPal, so there's always going to be that buyer protection available to anybody who's purchasing these items. Also be linking Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you want to follow me on any of those things, post other comics and collectible things, maybe from my own collection, or cute cat pictures, because who doesn't love those? But I've been your host, Nabil. Catch you next time on your friendly neighborhood comic dude.